Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise to take a short call in this first reading of the New Zealand Horticultural Export Authority Amendment Bill. New Zealand First supports this bill, at least to the Select Committee, and very probably beyond it. Mr Speaker, at first glance, the bill appears to be well-intentioned and not overly imbued with controversy, in spite of comments from my Green colleague, who I think has probably given what's possibly the grumpiest speech in support of a bill that I've heard in quite a while. So national members can, rest assured you're doing it right, but you're doing everything else wrong. So doubtless we'll go through this in more detail as the bill progresses. I do like the Green member's suggestion of country of origin labelling. That's something that we generally support, but whether it's within the ambit of this bill or able to be within it remains to be seen. Mr Speaker, the general policy statement proclaims that the purpose of the Act is to promote the effective export marketing of horticultural commodities. Groups representing growers and exporters of a specific horticultural commodity, e.g. avocados, choose whether to export within the framework established by the Act. If a group opts to export under the Act, the group develops an export marketing strategy that contains grade or quality requirements for its products, which is eminent common sense. And I'm surprised in actual fact that it's not something that exists to a greater degree across the board. The New Zealand Horticultural Export Authority, the authority, then licenses exporters of the specified commodity and monitors exporters' compliance with the relevant requirements, all of which is well and good, Mr Speaker, all of which is well and good. And the authority's website for the uninitiated, those of us who weren't around making laws 30-odd years ago, 29 years ago, in fact, Mr Barclay wasn't around 29 years ago, so he certainly wasn't making laws, perhaps uninitiated as to some of the machinations of the authority, but it says that the primary purpose of the HEA is to promote the effective export marketing of horticultural products. We do this by providing an export structure and support network, blah, blah, blah. The structure requires these groups to develop an export marketing strategy and their rules for exporting. Blah, 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 yes. Well, a lot of these bills do contain a lot of blah, 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 particularly ones created by previous Labor governments. It also says that the HEA also liaises with sector stakeholder groups on matters relating to market access, trade barriers and their removal, and plays a role in lobbying government on such matters on behalf of the industry, which is a good thing. It's a very good thing, because it means that it makes it a kind of voluntary single desk, Mr Speaker. And Mr Smith mentioned the single desk as if it was almost a separate issue from this. In actual fact, it's not. This is a voluntary single desk, so it's a virtual and voluntary single desk, and we know that this type of marketing works very well for New Zealand. We know we have examples such as Fonterra and Zespri and Enza, current events notwithstanding, that there is a great power that collective marketing brings to a nation of New Zealand's size and makeup, the construction of our economy, where most of it is focused in terms of production and export. Dr Clark mentioned that the possible benefits that could be given to the red meat industry if they were to follow a similar strategy. So it's gratifying to see that Labor is picking up on yet another one of New Zealand's first policy initiatives. And I'm sure that they'll be supporting our bill when it does get drawn from the ballot. Unless, of course, the government wants to sneak in and steal a bit of their thunder and select the bill and bump it up the order paper all by themselves. And we'd be most happy if they were to choose to do that, Mr Speaker. So it works, a single desk works very well for importers and regulators in overseas jurisdictions as well, because they have a single point of contact to deal with, and because they know that they're then dealing with a government-accredited agency that can be trusted to set and maintain standards. They know what they're buying, and they know that it will be true to label. And it works for producers and exporters for the same reason, Mr Speaker. It helps to maximise the single desks, helps to maximise returns to the growers and the producers and the exporters, and that benefits the entire New Zealand Inc. story, because it means that New Zealand companies are not competing against one another in world markets. There's a premium, Mr Speaker, which is attached to brand New Zealand that has been estimated at anywhere up to about 15%. And it helps nobody at all to have that premium left on the shelf, because New Zealand producers and exporters are competing against each other for shelf space for the same market, in the same market, for goods which, in all honesty, would sell anyway and sell for the premium if we weren't discounting against each other. So it's good for our companies to have that kind of an advantage, Mr. And I say our companies in a nationalistic sense, not in a nationalising sense or a socialist sense. Nobody wants the private businesses that are our farmers and our producers and our growers to be brought under any kind of state umbrella. But what we do want is the most unfair advantage that New Zealand business can be given. We do. We want, New Zealand First wants New Zealand businesses to have an unfair advantage out there in the world. We want them to succeed, to do well. And the single desk is a very powerful tool in terms of achieving that. So The voluntary single desk is a step in the right direction, Mr Speaker. The authority's website describes it as kind of halfway house between a completely regulated market and a completely free market. And that's probably a good thing, if nothing else, in the sense that it's an acknowledgement from the government that this free market ideology thing actually doesn't work, and the playing field is never actually level unless it is artificially made so by intervention. But like all good things, once a system's been in place for a while, and coming up 30 years is probably long enough, one or two areas do show up where there is room for improvement, where the bugs need to be ironed out, and this bill intends to make some of those improvements, Mr Speaker, and as Mr O'Connor mentioned, and others have touched on as well, the system for fees collection and the system for fines, two of those things which will enable the authority to operate in a much more streamlined fashion, do its job a lot better, a lot more efficiently. These are good things that need to be sorted. In fact, the Minister, Mr Speaker, in a press release stated that the bill was introduced to update and future-proof the Act, and that can only be a good thing. And if it can achieve that, Mr Speaker, then New Zealand First will be more than happy to support it going through the entire process and becoming law. And at first examination, as I say, there does not appear to be anything too much of a contentious nature. I will look forward to examining it in the Select Committee under, as I have mentioned before, the very able and affable chairmanship of Mr McKelvey. And that being the case, I don't intend to take up too much more of the House's time at this stage, except to reiterate that New Zealand First will support this bill through to first reading and probably beyond. Thank you.
Todd Barclay.